Markets, I'm talking the stock market, has been down for the last few days, and they continue to slide today. This market dip comes specifically after China announced retaliating against U.S. tariffs with its own duties on American products. China's tariffs that are targeting soy, energy, and a total of 818 Chinese imports could have devastating effects on the very people who voted for President Trump. Let's take a look at who specifically stands to lose the most of China's recent announcement. President Trump won the Ohio vote by 8 percentage points in the 2016 election. And yet Ohio, the state of Ohio, could be the hardest hit by this looming trade war with Americans' biggest trading partners. In 2017, 38% of Ohio exports went to our neighbor Canada, a total of $18.9 billion. Mexico is Ohio's second largest market, a total of $6.5 billion in exports in 2017. With President Trump threatening to tear up NAFTA and impose new tariffs, Ohio could see a steep drop in exports to both of our neighboring countries. When it comes to imports, Ohio brought in $12.9 billion in goods from China and another $12.2 billion from Canada. With tariffs on the horizon, Ohioans could be paying a lot more for everyday products they rely on just to get by. Let's look at another state in danger of losing out, Iowa. Trump won the state by 9%. And as one of the country's biggest soybean producers, the state could feel the pain of these new Chinese tariffs. Iowa exported $2 billion in soybeans to China in 2016, making up about 4% of the state's entire economy that year. And new Chinese tariffs on coal hurt states that voted for Donald Trump, as well as his energy agenda brings back coal. Trump won Wyoming with a whopping 45.8 margin in 2016. Meanwhile, coal exports, they jumped 61% in 2017 from a year earlier, and shipments to Asia more than doubled at the same time. Wyoming, it is one of the biggest producers of coal. In 2016, it produced 41% of all U.S. coal production. So far, it looks like a lot of Americans who cast a vote for President Trump are losing out in this looming trade war with the world. So here's my question. Who specifically is President Trump fighting for? And are the policies putting in place going to do anything of the sort? Joining me now, John Harwood, editor-at-large at CNBC. Okay, John, first, Canada, Mexico, and the European Union, and now China, they all appear to be retaliating against industries affected by Trump country. Clearly, this is by design. Is it actually going to come to pass, or is this some sort of rhetoric, game of chicken, or brinksmanship that's going to get people to play ball? Because a Trump enthusiast would say this is how President Trump gets people to the table.
Well, we can't say for sure because it all hasn't taken effect yet. But the deeper we get into this, the further we go, the more insults that the president directs at these countries, the more he turns up the dial on this. And note, this is unrelated, but he went after the German government today, Angela Merkel. The more likely it is that this, in fact, is going to happen. And certainly we've seen in the case of steel and aluminum tariffs, steel prices are way up. So those input prices are already hurting American companies and therefore American consumers. This is a false promise from the president that by going to trade war with our allies and adversaries alike, China as well as our NAFTA compatriots and EU, that he's going to make us better off. He's not.
Well, dairy farmers might say the president, he's fighting for me. We want to get Canada to do away with this dairy tariff. Well, guess where they agreed to do away with it? In TPP. Canada was already prepared to tear it up. So why is the president suddenly raising that issue now? He could have had it had he stayed in the program.
The president, in his campaign, made a lot of promises that didn't make sense. A lot of his policy does not make sense. He's trying to appeal to people and make them believe that the problems that they're experiencing are not the fault of changes in the economy, changes in technology, changes in the modern world, but rather the result of elites in Washington, elites in international trade organizations, stupid, incompetent trade deals. None of that is true. There are ways that any set of trade agreements can be adjusted to help some and hurt others. But in the main, the free trading regime that the world has moved to over the last several decades has made the world better off. And this is why business groups that favor Donald Trump on things like tax policy, Chamber of Commerce and others, Business Roundtable, have come out and said this is bad. This is why it hurts the stock market. This is the president making promises that are, in essence, know-nothing promises to people and then trying to sell them. And the question is, how deep does he take it?
Is President Trump going to be forced to increase the subsidies for these farmers if they get hurt? If suddenly soybean farmers lose China as a customer, won't they be turning to the president saying, I need more help? Where's that money going to come from?
Well, he has said, oh, I'm going to take care of the farmers. But how exactly are you going to do that? We've got a budget deficit that is skyrocketing as a result of what's happened with the tax cut that he passed. We're headed for $1 trillion deficits next year. Is Congress really going to lay out a bunch of new money to help soybean farmers from a self-inflicted wound that the Trump administration has inflicted on them? I think that is dubious. I think this is something that is very consequential as we head into midterm elections. And that's why you got a lot of Republicans in the Midwest, Ben Sasse, Chuck Grassley, others, who are saying, hey, whoa, stop, pull back. Is President Trump going to do it? I don't know. We've seen Secretary Nielsen out this morning saying no apologies for their border policy. Maybe the president will do the same on economics, although he has, at crunch time, usually deferred to the interests of big money when you've got tax policy disputes and that sort of thing. So maybe he'll do the same on trade.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.